This is Carl Stafford, Extension Agent in Culpeper, Virginia. And livestock forages are my appreciation in agriculture and the soils. I'm for soil because what it does for that system that I'm so appreciative of, pastures, and you get on into no-till crops as well. That soil matters everything to the production of that system and soil life and what the benefits of storing carbon, organic matter, productivity, moisture, retention. So I am for soil because it does a lot for agriculture.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee. Dr. Eric Benfelt is taking the week off this week. If I know Eric, he is probably on a long walk or working in his garden at this time of the year, but we'll welcome him back as co-host in the next podcast. Also joining us, Mary Sketch Bryant with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. And Mary, we have some special guests for the episode today. Would you do the honor of introducing our special guest? I understand they're both in Page County, Virginia.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, we're so grateful to have Meagan Dyer and Elizabeth Baldwin with us today, both from Page County, work with Virginia Cooperative Extension there. Elizabeth Baldwin is the unit coordinator in agriculture and natural resources, an animal science agent in Page County, and Meagan Dyer is the 4-H development agent. So we've got a lot of expertise across the board, all with ties to soil health on the podcast today. So excited to cover everything. I know, Elizabeth, you have expertise in livestock and ruminants, and then Meagan with education and outreach and ties to human well-being. So without further ado, I guess we'll start with, would love to hear a little bit about both of your background and what brought you to Extension, and why you were interested in work with Extension. We'll start with you, Elizabeth.
Okay, that is a really great question, and something that I guess it's kind of fun to think about. So I grew up in far Southwest Virginia. I grew up on a small farm. My family had some hair sheep and some cattle. My dad was an agriculture educator at the high school level, a high school ag teacher for a few years growing up, but then he became the county extension agent in my home county. So I've always kind of been around extension, had an interest in it, always liked education, farming, agriculture, and so this felt like a really natural fit. So I studied animal science at Virginia Tech and really enjoyed that, fell in love with that, and then went to North Carolina State for my master's degree, which was also in animal science, but I got to focus more on cattle nutrition, some grazing management. So all of those things, it's really, I guess, Extension drew me to it because it's a support to farmers. So I get to work with people every day, get to feel like I'm a resource to them. And so I feel like I have a really fun job.
And how about you, Meagan?
So I grew up in Madison County, Virginia, and I have been a 4-H'er my entire life. I grew up in the program. I'm a product of it. And I went to Virginia Tech. I knew I wanted to work with youth. I have been involved in a lot of youth programs and clubs at Virginia Tech, getting involved with education. And I went to Tech basically to become a school teacher. But I knew I always wanted to be involved in the 4-H program and give back in the way that the 4-H program gave to me. And then through an internship, a 4-H intern in Culpeper, I realized, why would I be just involved in 4-H as a volunteer when I can make it my job and it's something I love to do and I get to do it every day? And so that really appealed to me, and here I am, and I get to work with kids every day, and every day is different, and it's something I really enjoy.
Well, thank you both for what you do with Virginia Cooperative Extension. Is such an important service, not only to the farm community, but also to general consumers. You know, you guys have tax programs and youth development programs. It's extremely important that everyone have a relationship with their local extension office. Elizabeth, I guess my first question is for you, and kind of looking back on some of our previous episodes, we've had guests where we talk about soil health as it relates to human nutrition. I'd like to pick your brain a little bit about soil health as it relates to livestock nutrition. I see in your background, you're a ruminant nutrition specialist. For instance, when a cow is grazing, does soil health make any difference whatsoever?
I think so. I think soil health makes a difference probably in everything, but I always joke, especially with my cattle producers, to kind of get a mindset switch that maybe you're a grass farmer and not a cattle producer, that you're actually really trying to focus on growing grass. And so that all comes back to soil health and thinking about if we have healthy soil, if we have active soil, that definitely directly relates to our ability to graze effectively, to grow grass well, and to have healthy, productive animals.
So bottom line, would you say that healthier soil ultimately leads to healthier livestock?
Yes, I think that it would be really easy to make that direct connection, that soil health is directly related to livestock health and really important.
Meagan, a question for you. It seems like you've been involved in and interested in education your entire life and also have a long history with 4-H. And I did not growing up in the 4-H program, only recently have learned how broad the 4-H program is and how many different areas it intersects with, from horse club to a shooting club, to all kinds of opportunities. But just wondering where you intersect stewardship for the land and the soil in some of the educational work you do.
Sure. Well, I think that taking care of our community and the land around us is an important aspect of all of our programs. Even going to camp, our campers know that we practice leave no trace, and that we're leaving things better than the way we found it. And that is something that is ingrained in all of our programs. I became interested in soil health. I can admit that I sort of have a brown thumb. I'm not very good at gardening and things like that. But I became interested in this program from learning actually from Elizabeth, the importance of soil health and how it affects not only gardening and nutrition, but affects really every aspect of our lives, because everything that we need either needs the ground or comes from the ground. And so when it came to our school program and getting kids involved in nutrition and gardening and how to grow your own food and things like that, that's where I really became interested in the soil health initiative.
How did the 4-H program change during the coronavirus pandemic, if it changed?
Sure. So the 4-H program really had to make a shift. I was hired right at the end of the pandemic to where things were starting to open back up. But there's a lot of 4-H agents that made significant changes and strides within the 4-H program. We didn't just stop programming, but when it came to our meeting space, a lot of things went online. We figured out how to online spaces, educational and entertaining, and then also really worked on train the trainer resources for our school teachers to provide them needed resources to reach their students.
Elizabeth, I'd like to ask you about the Master Gardener program. To my understanding, that is an extension program. Am I correct?
Yes, it is. So master gardeners are extension volunteers, and so they go through a pretty extensive training process to become master gardeners. And then as part of that, they have to volunteer so many hours afterwards, but they are extension volunteers and are a great way that we're able to reach communities. If folks have questions about gardening or garden pests, they're a wonderful tool to be able to reach out to and really help us expand our capacity in reaching the community.
Something I want to hear from both of you on, is I know Elizabeth, I think you brought it from your work in North Carolina at NC State, is the Soil Your Undies program, which if folks just hear, it's like, what? But it's a really great demonstration for soil health and can be used and you all have used it for multiple age groups and whatnot. So would love to hear from you a little bit about what that actually is, because I don't think it's actually, well, it is kind of literally soiling your undies. So if you could just explain that would be great.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I don't want to say I borrowed the idea or you don't want to reinvent the wheel. If it's a good thing, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I borrowed the idea from my work at North Carolina State. One of my professors there, Dr. Matt Poor, had kind of started this where they took men's cotton brief underwear and we buried it at people's farms that had some different management practices. So maybe things that would be better for the soil, like rotational grazing versus maybe fallow cropland that had been really tilled hard, didn't have any crops on it. So we buried those underwear, we waited. Typically, we dug up some at 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and 8 weeks to see the progression over time. And we took those out for farm demonstrations to show folks the differences. And that sort of helps measure soil biological activity. So we can measure soil chemical activity through a soil test. We can look at soil structure, but the biological activity or the things that the microbes are doing in the soil is a lot harder to measure. So this is not quantitative, it's not a scientific study, but the cotton underwear is cotton, it's a carbohydrate, and so those microbes will eat that. And so when we unearthed the underwear, the soils that had greater biological activity had pretty much disintegrated, or the microbes had eaten all the cotton, and all that was left was the elastic waistband. So I had familiarity with that through working with farmers, and then we took that and I worked with Meagan to adapt it for something that we used at the middle school.
That is a unique experiment that I have never in all my years heard of, but very creative, and one that you can visually immediately understand the results.
Yes. And it's a little funny, a little silly. I mean, farmers, kids alike are always like, ooh, underwear, and always ask more questions. So it really catches people off guard.
Well, there's no underwear buried on my farm. I'm sure you heard that more than once.
And Megan, I'd love to hear
Go ahead.
little bit about the kids' experience with that.
Sure. So when we introduced this experiment, the kids were really excited, but also taken back. They were asking a ton of questions. They were a little weirded out. The title of this experiment is jarring, but that's the fun part when it comes to middle schoolers. The weirder, the better sometimes. And so they were really involved in the project. And every time we would come in while the underwear were buried, they were asking questions about it. When it's time to dig up, what's going to happen? Always asking those questions and getting involved. And it was a really fun experience. As after we buried the underwear, obviously there's a time period before you can dig that underwear back up. And so a lot of times when this experiment is ran, you just leave them and you come back 2 months later. But we really wanted to focus on more topics of reinforcing the scientific method and different SOLs through the utilization of soil health. And so we did several lessons about once a week while the underwear were buried to further the discussion of soil and how we run an experiment, why we ask questions, and got the kids really involved in that way. And it got them really excited about gardening and growing things and really understanding the impacts of soil health on growing your own food. And it actually turned into a really fun discussion of the importance of growing your own food, how you can do that. And it led to a teen cuisine club there at the middle school where middle schoolers are learning how to cook from things that are coming out of those garden beds that those underwear are buried in.
We're talking today with Meagan Dyer and Elizabeth Baldwin. They're both with Virginia Cooperative Extension, both in Page County, Virginia. I believe in Stanley. Is that correct?
Yes.
The wonderful metropolis of Stanley. Beautiful location, absolutely beautiful location. I want to thank both of you again for being on the podcast this week. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes remaining, and I'd like to spend the bulk of that time talking about soil testing. This is a question for either of you. What should consumers know, backyard vegetable gardeners, what should they know about the soil testing process? When do you do it? How do you do it? Who do you send it to? How does it work?
Yeah, so I could answer that question. So all Virginia Cooperative Extension offices, we've got one in each county in the state, those offer soil testing services. So for folks who are growing a commercial crop, so like hay and pasture land, commercial crops, commercial vegetables, the testing is free. It's no charge. They come to our office, get the soil sample boxes and forms. The agent there can work you through the process of taking it. For folks who are doing it for their lawn or backyard garden, the cost is $10. It's the same form, same kind of process, and those get mailed. The participant or the producer or gardener will mail those samples in the mail to the lab in Blacksburg, and then the results will be emailed to them. So it's pretty easy. It's pretty quick. It's great to know some baseline information about your soil, especially in terms of course, for plant production and plant growth, but also in thinking about being good stewards of the environment. We don't want to over apply products or under apply products. So it helps you also save a little bit of money. You don't want to over apply fertilizer. It costs a lot. So it's really helpful for both home gardeners or large scale producers to have an understanding and know what their soil test is.
Meagan, any input on soil tests?
So again, as the 4-H agent, I can admit that I am not the expert in this whatsoever. When it comes to the soil tests, I can walk you through the forms and I can tell you where they are in our office. And other than that, this is absolutely Elizabeth's expertise.
Okay, just about a couple of minutes remaining, and my final question is: it's a funny story time. You're both extension agents. You both get phone calls from the public, probably on a wide variety of topics, everything from insects to how long can I thaw out my turkey. What's the most interesting question you ever got, Elizabeth and then Meagan?
Oh man, we get some really interesting ones. I think one of my favorites was I had somebody call me once and ask, they have cleared a whole pasture of trees and they wanted to know if they could bury all of the trees on their property. And I thought, I don't know the answer to that or why you would want to do that maybe, but I can find out. So I reached out to our forester and got some answers, but that was an interesting question.
That is a very interesting question. Meagan, how about you?
Working with kids, I get a lot of interesting questions all the time. But I have to say, I can't think of one offhand. But I always tell my kids the only bad question is the one that you want to ask and don't. So if you have a question and you're interested in something and you don't know where to start, your extension office is a really great place to start. We're not going to know absolutely everything. Not one person knows everything in the world, but we do have great resources through Virginia Tech and Virginia Cooperative Extension to, at the very least, find the person that can give you those answers.
Well, that is a great answer. I wish I had a dime for every time I had called my local extension office, because I'm one of those people that calls fairly often. Thank you both for what you do with Virginia Cooperative Extension and sharing your expertise or your knowledge on soil health and various other topics. Thank you again for being on the program today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you both.
And now a quick introduction on the 4 principles of soil health with Dr. Rory McGuire.
Yes, minimize soil disturbance is one of the first things that we worked out when we were looking at conserving soils. After the Dust Bowl was caused by drought, but also caused by the moldboard plow disturbing and destroying soil structure. So when you disturb the soil, you destroy soil structure, and you also burn off organic matter. So minimizing soil disturbance by practices such as no-till, you help build soil structure. When you have good soil structure, water drains properly. You don't have problems with compaction. If you have compactions, your roots can't grow through the soil. Minimizing soil disturbance by not moldboard plowing, doing conservation till or no-till is extremely important.
And that wraps it up for this episode of For the Soil, a conversation, which is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you have a specific question about soil health, contact your local extension office, your local USDA Service Center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee.